When you look at a colorful image like this, your eyes should follow the main river, but they probably also get distracted by the trees here, here, and here. All this color variability adds a lot of complexity, so in this video, you'll learn how simplifying color can help strengthen your image. The first step to unifying the color is to try and take these yellow values and bring them to match the greens of the surrounding forest. So for that, I'm going to go grab an HSL adjustment, open it up, and let's go into the yellows, where what we'll do is push up the hue until we get a matching hue. And what I'm looking at are these sliders here. So the top is the input yellow and the bottom is the output being green. It doesn't look very nice in the image, but I am in the green zones here from this. The problem is that the underlying yellows have a lot of saturation, and they still do now that they're green, whereas these background values actually had very little saturation. They're almost, in some cases, pale or almost white. So I actually want to add some saturation to these background areas while reducing it here. The way I'm going to do that is I need to bring these trees down to the saturation of the background, and then we can just lift the saturation of everything all together once they've been unified. So let's take our saturation down to the point where it kind of fades away. Around -80, it's a pretty strong adjustment, but these trees now are matching the background and it feels more uniform. Now we have a number of things we need to do here still, but just take a look from before, where your eyes are bouncing all over the image, to after, where it really does bring you to the river. And that's the goal of simplifying or unifying the color. We just need to improve the result here because there's a lot of unwanted changes and it's lacking contrast in color that we need to bring to the image. So breaking this apart, the first issue is the edge of the river. Things that were yellow got turned green, and I don't want to do that. So let's just put a very basic mask on here. Just click for a white mask, hitting B for my brush, switching to a black paint color. I can just go brush along the edges of the river so that I'm revealing the original yellow colors along the edge of the river. I just want to take care not to paint over any trees, because then I could turn a tree that was yellow and make it visible again. So just want to leave the trees that have become green as they are, and I can go through and zoom in and really work this if I need to, but I think that we're going to get the result we need. Just kind of hand painting this, and then we'll come back and make a few more little tweaks here, but you can see how that's made the river look better with its original colors. And it's okay to have that variability around the river here. I just didn't want the variability in the trees, which are creating just kind of hot spots, if you will, in terms of unique hues that jump out. So now that we have that, the next thing I'm thinking about is that in the original, the forest floor has a lot of yellow values, and I think they look very nice. They're not as bright as these values, so they're not distracting, and I'd like to bring them back. I just want to change things like these trees and not necessarily the forest floor. So I need to paint out these dark shadow areas with black, and that means that I should be reaching for a luminosity selection. So I'm going to click on D to target things which are dark. And I want to make sure I'm excluding the trees, so this is not yet selective enough. I'm going to slide down in Lumenzia to something like darks 4, and now you can see it's targeting the forest floor, but not those trees. So I'll be able to correctly paint on just the forest floor. So let's go click on cell to make that an active selection. We can see the cell button's lit green, letting us know that that's the case. Making my brush a bit bigger and still painting with black, but this time through a selection that's going to help target dark tones. Now I can help reveal the forest floor's original yellow color, which is just going to add a little bit more depth to the forest because it separates the trees from the ground and brings back some of that just lovely original color that we had there. And we can see the difference here. If I shift click on the mask to see where we have the adjustment everywhere, how it's kind of a hollow feeling in the forest afterwards. Now those tree values are starting to shine through. So I think that's improved things, and I'm going to leave that where it is. Let's hit Command D to deselect. And now I want to bring up this color, right? As I mentioned, the saturation is very, very low. If we look at the indicator here, we're at like values of like 5, 15%. I mean, some of these trees are partially dead, but the saturations are very low. So to bring up that saturation, I want to take the areas of low saturation and increase them, meaning I want vibrance. So I'm going to go for a vibrance adjustment layer and then just take that and push it way up. And I think that that adds some nice feeling to the trees. Now, some of these areas are getting too saturated. So what I want to do is bring up areas of low saturation without letting areas of higher saturation get too bright. So let's bring down the actual saturation to kind of offset that. This is sort of compressing the difference between low and high saturation values in the image. And you can see from before and after how that kind of nicely adds to the trees here. And I could dial this back a little bit, maybe. I'm just gonna knock this down to like 87%, something like that feels about right. And I like what that's doing to the forest, but I don't like what it's doing to the river in the blues or these red magenta values here. That's getting way too strong. So I want to knock those out with another mask. Let's go get rid of this default mask and create another one based on color. And what I want to do here is allow the color to come through everywhere except for these problem colors. So I'm going to reach for the invert so I can pick everything but blue, everything but magenta, everything but red. It's going to invert that. The cyans that are going to be in the background trees is probably okay. Maybe I'll knock that out too. But the greens and yellows I'm okay with. So this will bring forward the green and yellow through the vibrance when I click mask as it knocks out those other colors. You see how that just improves the river. So now the river is not getting all crazy punchy like that, but the forest is picking up that lovely color. And I could even push up the opacity a little further now that I've got that protecting mask. So I'm back up to 100% now. So I like what that's done. And I'm seeing one more area of color I want to adjust, which is this magenta here. With my drone, there's some pretty significant color problems, and the reds and magentas here are just too strong by the time I corrected for the overall green tint in the original raw. So to knock that out, I'm going to go grab another HSL adjustment layer. This time we're going to go switch down to the magentas and push up the hue here. And I'm just looking visually to see where do I get a balance, something around maybe 60 or so. These magentas still have magenta, but they're just not crazy like before versus after. So that just mellows things out there, neutralizes kind of a hot spot of color. And there may be some areas where this is causing problems elsewhere in the image. So just to be safe, I'm going to add a black mask here and then just using a white brush, paint in the areas along the river of these magentas that I want to diminish. That way I'm not necessarily applying this everywhere in the forest. I don't have to go through and check all those little details if I just isolate it to areas that I know need the fix. So that just keeps things a little bit simpler for me. And now that we've kind of mellowed out the color, let's just look from before, we've got all that color to now we've simplified quite a bit. I'd like to add some more separation in terms of contrast here. Specifically, the mid-tone values I think could have some more contrast. And so for that, we'll use the contrast feature in Lemenzia, but we want to guide it to the midtone. So I'm going to click M for midtone preview. I'm going to back that off to just a midtones 1. And what we have now is something that's going to target these midtones, but it's going to exclude things like the forest floor that doesn't need to get any darker. And so when I click on contrast now, it's going to ask if we want to blend if, which is a perfectly fine thing to do with basic D, M, and L previews. It's great. So we'll say yes. So it's going to generate that curve. It's giving us a blend if, so it's not taking up more file space with a luminosity mask, and it's totally adjustable, but you can see how that's improved the contrast in the image. And I can kick up the opacity to really see a big difference if I want. I think something close to the default is about right, around 30, 40% there. I think nicely enhances the image. Now with that, I feel like the river edges are kind of dark here and here. I don't necessarily need them to match the middle, but I'd like to bring up that brightness. So I'm going to go grab a brightness contrast layer, open that up, and let's just bring it up to say, I don't know, plus 30 or 40 is about the right place. And we just need to isolate it to the correct areas here. So let's alt click on mask for a black mask. So it's hidden, and we just need to paint over the river. And I want a simple way to paint only blue pixels. So I'm going to go click on the color button once again. And this time, let's change it so we're selecting not the inverse, but just regular blue. And I'm not going to directly make a mask because I don't want it across the middle. I'm going to hand paint it over here and hand paint it over here where it needs it. So I'm going to click on selection and then just hitting B for my brush. Once again, brushing with white through that, and then go hit the other side here a bit. Just kind of evens that out. Not to the point where things are the same, but just less difference there to kind of mellow out the river and be less distracting. And now I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. Let's hit L for a lasso selection. And I'd like to create a vignette to help further bring the viewer's eyes towards the center of the image. I'll just go click on vignette, which will convert that lasso over to a vignette using the default feather. And you can see how that nicely brings your eye towards the center. And overall, from the before image, where it has a lovely set of colors, and I do like it, and it's authentic to the colors of the scene, but it's very distracting and takes away from the main image of this snaking river to after, where we have much more uniformity. Now you may say you don't want as much color, you don't want as much HSL, so we can go in here, we could dial back the amount of extra color if you want to. I'm gonna go take it down to like 70% or so. And then the HSL, if we take the opacity and we bring this back, you can see we can go let all the way into the original where there's too much color, too much variability, to something in the middle where it's a little bit more balanced, but it still has that color variation all the way up to the max value. So you can dial in the amount you want. And I think for me, something around 65% or so feels like a nice balance of the overall result from before to after, where it has a much stronger attention on this central snaking river. Now click to this next video to learn more about ways you can enhance color with Photoshop.